question is, what is the most important phenomenon? What's the most important thing for a human being? This is a simple question. However, I have asked this question from many people. Not one person came up with an answer right away. First of all, like it took them a fairly long time, few minutes at least, before they say, I'm not sure, or they come up with an reply that is really not thought out. It's not profoundly rooted. So I like to look at this question first, deeply, and then place myself in that passive but so aware state to receive intimation of possibilities. So the question is, what is the most important thing to a human being? What's the most important thing? And we are not talking about essential physical necessities. We want to step beyond those. Physicality, as far as we know, it's in need of nourishment, food, water, and before everything else, air to breathe. Otherwise, the physical life that we are conscious of cannot simply go on without the physical necessities of life. Shelter is another one, probably. Now, so we want to step beyond those and think of more in the terms of the human psyche, human intellectual evolution, human psychological developments. To look at a human being beyond his physical needs and necessities. So we basically going to acknowledge the physical necessities, fundamentals. However, the way we describe or understand, identify human beings, we look at human beings as infinite potentials which are far beyond physical representation of a human being. So keeping that in mind, this is a definition of human which acknowledges the physique, the material being of a human, but at the same time explores the deeper consciousness, the deeper awareness, the deeper identities, if I can use that word, of a human being. So the question here, What is the most important thing to a human being? We have to explore the potentials of a human being. Before everything else, what's the most important thing on a more superficial levels? And then we start going deeper and deeper. What's the most important thing is basically we go back to the statement that the reality of man is his thought. So intellectual activities in a human society, human community, to a human is the most profound conditions that's taking place that basically defines a human being. The reality of man is his thought. What we think of is going to shape how we behave and influences our actions. So the reality of man is his thought. Thoughts are the source, are the instruments of scientific discoveries. Science itself is an offspring of our intellectual faculty. Knowledge of external world, external to us, if we divide, which I don't like to divide anything, but in this case, in order to understand external world and the inner world of a human being, internal world, externality and then reality. Our externality is the physical phenomenal world. Phenomenal world is discovered and explored through sciences. Science is a product of our intellectual faculty. So our intellectual faculty is mainly concerned with the external, the physical world. The world that can be sensed. Anything that can be sensed is external to us. Because our senses are detectors for detecting the external physical world. As simple as it is. Our intellectual faculty interprets the data that it's receiving through the channels, our senses, the channels of our senses. And it's interpreted in a way that it's coherent with our understanding and comprehension, and that's how we make our frame of what we call reality. Our inner world, our reality, this reality which is referred to, our psyche, our inner world, is more so about our subjective evaluation of reality than compared to or in contrast to the objective views, which is mostly shared by the rest of the humanity. And that's how we can live with each other and point to one thing, and knowing that the other person will see almost the same thing that I am looking at. And this is how we can share things. We can share understanding this world. Now, when it comes to knowledge, obviously the external source of our knowledge, which is formal knowledge, acquired knowledge, is limited and objective, as we just pointed out. Why? But the inner understanding, the inner world, inner reality of a human being is subjective, and it's much deeper, much more profound than the external. And subjectivity has a lot to do with this. I'm not going to talk about this today in this session. However, later on we can get down to the subjective and objective differences, and why is it so important to thoroughly move into the depth of these two sides, objective and subjective, but not today. So, going back to the knowledge, the external knowledge, which is acquired, we learn it through the instruments that we have, mainly after the data is transmitted to our intellectual faculty. Our intellectual faculty is the one that cooks the data and gives us the final outcome. Our thoughts. Our thoughts are developed. And it's very obvious that the external world, the acquiring of the knowledge of the external world, is limited and always lacking. We never can get to a point to simply say that we know everything about such and such. We can never say that. That's the nature of the acquired or formal knowledge. Learned knowledge. We can always learn more. Now, that doesn't mean the inner knowledge of our own selves can be captured and identified or described. No such a thing. However, the reason that the inner knowledge is different from the outer is the methodology. I don't like to use this word methodology. I don't like to use methods, which are habitual behavior, instead of being open to all the possibilities at all times. But nonetheless, the way we acquire inner knowledge, it's different from the way I should not say acquire, the way we come in touch with our inner understanding is different than acquired knowledge, which is external, about the external world. So which means that, just to point to the main difference, which is the sources, just quickly here, because I'm not going to go into that here. Talked about this in other recordings, is that the source of our inner knowledge, inner understanding, I can't use any other word except understanding, comprehension, all of these that we use ordinarily, but they don't necessarily do justice to our inner understanding. But we have to use the same word because there's nothing to replace it with. And we know our language is a language of a child. You're just at the end of darkness and the beginning of light. So we have to understand that we are at the beginning of developing these sorts of communicative tools that we simply don't have access to right now. We don't know what they are or how to apply them. But anyway, if we move on, the inner knowledge really focuses on one thing and one thing alone. And that is the most important aspect of our inner knowledge is the knowledge of our own selves, which is basically knowing who we are. Our potentials need to be studied, need to be not only acknowledged, but thoroughly looked at, observed. These type of observation of our own selves. So the most important aspect of knowledge, if we just agree with what we have come up with so far, is the knowledge of our own selves. And there are, throughout the history, probably the most profound statements or references to our own knowledge of our own selves. Knowing yourself is to know God. That's how weighty it is. No, we don't know anything about ourselves, and we certainly don't know anything about God. So, but the statement puts a lot of weight on the depth of this matter or an importance of it. Why? Why is it so important to know our own selves? And how do we do it? To know our own selves means to be able to reach and actually access potentials that we might not even be aware of, and be definitely not aware of infinite potentials that we have within ourselves, that within our capacities, capabilities, that we are discovering and coming in touch with on a daily basis, no matter how small or how colossal the potential is. It's not important. The most thing is that it is a potential, an ability, capability, a capacity that we were not simply aware of. And once we become aware of it, and hopefully know how to apply it and how to use it, how to employ it, then will benefit, not only will benefit us, but the rest of humanity. And that's the point. So let's go back again to the importance of self-knowledge. Now the next question that's related to the topic of this recording is that how do we get to know our own selves? Think about that. This is not an easy question. How do you know who you are? How do you get to know who you are? How? I'm looking for a way which is not bowing down to a methodology. So what it is that I have to do to know myself deeper and better? How about that? This kind of question instead of how. Use what. Now let's explore that a little bit. How do I get to know anything? How do I know? How do I get to know anything? And I'm talking about thing, Thing. By observation. Through our senses, by touching, by smelling. Somehow I'd be able to gather the data through the instrumentality of my senses. So basically, attributes of things I identify and describe. That's what I call the knowledge of things. Now, when I want to look at something, or let's say, actually, no, let's not say that. Say it like this: if my eyes wants to examine something of my own body, let's say, be specific. Let's say if I want to look at my own face, how can I look at my own face using my own eyes? I can't do that. I simply cannot do that because my eyes are external to me, not internal. So what do? The best I can do is to find a reflection of my own face, and then I can look at it, because that reflection is external to me. And that's what we use a mirror. In the case of our inner world, we simply don't have access to a kind of a mirror, the way we understand what a mirror is, in order to reflect our inner reality. A mirror doesn't do that because it's a physical thing and it has physical limitations which cannot allow a mirror to go beyond. It's limited to that. So what do we use? We need a mirror. I need to, if I want to see my own inner world, I want to be able to see a reflection of my own self. That would be very helpful. How do I do that? What is that reflection? I think that reflection is our interaction with other human beings. When I interact with another person, that person becomes the mirror that I can see my own self in it, reflected off that. So here's the end of this recording, because we just found out how to understand the question, which was what's the most important thing, what's the most important phenomenon in a human being's life, in a human being. In the life of a human being. What's the most important thing? Is human interaction. Human interaction is the most important aspect of our lives. Everything is built upon, and everything's foundation is human interaction. Without human interaction, nothing exists. Nothing takes place. No developments, no advancements, no movements, no progress. After a very short time, no humanity. That's it.